Welcome to the Nonprofits, the thrice weekly show where we address news and current events through the lens of atheism and secular humanism. For our first segment this week, we'll be looking south to Oklahoma, where some fishy things have been happening with their statewide school standards. Stephen Harder, please give us the lowdown.
You bet. Thanks so much, Scott. Oklahoma's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ryan Walters, is in hot water again, this time from nearly 36 religious leaders, atheists, parents, students, and even teachers. He and his State Department of Education are being sued for not only the new education standards that they have published, but also for how they went about enacting them. Highlights, or rather lowlights, include things such as injecting Christian nationalist talking points into all grade levels, teaching conspiracy theories as facts, and quickly changing what was and wasn't included in the 400-page document mere hours before it was supposed to be voted upon. Plaintiffs request that the new standards be struck down before the new school year begins in the fall. This story is from the Friendly Atheist, Hemant Mehta, on July 2nd, 2025.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. I want to stay with you for a second. Let's pick this apart a little bit here. The article talked about there's odd timing with how these changes in the standards were presented to the State Board of Education. What happened with that?
Odd indeed. Like a quick breakdown of the timeline, we'd be looking at, say, December 2024. That's when Walters first submits a draft of the standards that gains a lot of national attention because they are aggressively pushing right-wing talking points onto children. Then later on in May 2025, just a couple months ago, Walter doubles down on some of the most problematic portions, making them even worse, and submits this updated 400-page version around 4 p.m. So end of day, the day before the vote takes place. So about 9 hours later, the committee meets and votes to pass on the standards. No one's had time to review the 400-page document to see what has and hasn't been changed. They just vote on it and go with it. But a week later, people start digging in and they start noticing the differences. And that's when his underhanded tactics come to light and backlash increases. Now, July 2nd, the suit was filed, arguing that the standards violate the Constitution, the whole separation of church and state. The process lacked transparency, and they should be struck down before the new school year begins.
All right. Yeah, that definitely doesn't seems like kind of a shifty. I think we're being generous there when we say that was shifty. I want to jump over to Eli for a second here. Stephen just laid out some of these questionable strategies that they used to get it through the approval process. How else was the system rigged? I think we're just scratching the surface here. What else is going on? How did he rig the system in his favor in getting these changes passed?
So, because it goes beyond, like, it's not just the biblical indoctrination, which he swears he's not doing, by the way, but like he's taking that and he's shoehorning it into a bill that also mandates things that, that people will generally agree with, like free breakfast and lunch for kids, and like more funds going toward the benefit of the students instead of what he calls like the bureaucratic bloat, which is like administrative fees and bureaucratic fees for the school. More money for teachers, more incentives for teachers and things like that to attract, and keep more teachers in the state. So these are things that on the surface, if you don't pay attention to like the details of how he wants it done, on the surface they sound good. But then he's taking people that want to vote in favor of those things because they really, really want Oklahoma to come up from like 49th, I think 48th or 49th in the country in education. And they're like, well, if I have to deal with the Bible, to make that happen, then, is that really all that bad? And I think, the people are going to feel differently about that.
But so he's candy coating it, almost literally. It's like a shit-filled M&M, right? He's candy coating.
Yeah. I mean, okay. In a way, yeah. And the thing is, the candy coating isn't even all that effective because, like, the lunch program, for example, isn't viable in most districts. He wants them to submit budgets immediately detailing how they're going to account for the free meals for the students from funds that they are already getting. He's not planning to allocate more funds for the purpose of doing this. He insists they do
Unfunded mandates. Is that what you're saying?
unfunded mandate.
Yeah. Okay.
And then he intends to, if they cannot comply, if they can't work it into their budget, he'll send some people to talk to their budget. And if they just can't make it work, he will withdraw state funding from the school to punish them, I guess, for being poor. So at first it sounds like a shit-filled M&M, but once you get closer, it's not. It's just shit.
Huh, okay, so maybe just painted to look like an M&M.
Yeah, or there's a peanut in it, maybe.
Ooh, there's definitely a road we can go down there. I should probably divert us right away. I want to jump back to Stephen here. So obviously his methodology is, again, will be generous, questionable at best here. But what's some of the meat of what was going on here? What were some of the additions and changes that the new standards are going to focus on?
Yeah, well, like he is very, very proud of the fact that there are 40 references to the Bible in these new standards that are sprinkled across all grade levels. So it's like in every grade level, learning about just how important the Bible is and how we need to give two fucks about what the Bible says, because for fallacious reasons, obviously. Also, it talks about how students are to understand how Christian morality shaped American law and government, which just smacks of indoctrination, and not an iota of critical thinking, of actually asking, like, is this actually does this stand up to scrutiny? Because what is Christian morality? Apparently it can mean anything from owning slaves, if you're asking the founding fathers, and certainly any kind of racist undertones as well. And there's new facts to be taught to students as well, things that
naturally.
Yeah, of course. New, not the fake facts, the real facts of how maybe COVID-19 was created in a Chinese lab, and maybe let's explore the discrepancies in the 2020 election. Just all stuff that President Pumpkin would love. He would feel so affirmed, so validated to know that children with taxpayer money are being fed this by authorities in their lives.
I don't know, call me crazy, but that sounds like a big misuse of power there to me. I don't know. I want to jump back over to Eli here. So Stephen was talking about some specific content changes that have been pushed through, but I was wondering if you could address some new directions for the philosophy of the social studies curriculum. I mean, what are some of the other more maybe broad strokes on the changes they're making here?
Yeah, so, and I was grateful to him at Mehta for this, being the journalist that he is. He included some screenshots of the bill and the curriculum that talked about, what he wanted to include, some specific examples. So firstly is the idea that he wants to, that Ryan Walters wants to incorporate American exceptionalism into the social studies curriculum, which is this idea that the United States, which, contrary to the name, he does not mean all of the Americas, he means the United States, is inherently exceptional because of all of the influence that the early settlers and the founders had from the Christian Bible, right? It's not just that we need to give two fucks, like you said, Stephen, about the Bible. It's that the giving of fuck comes from the Bible, and that's kind of where
I missed that passage.
Yeah, it was the 11th commandment.
Thou shalt give a fuck to the Bible. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
But so some examples from the curricula. For in first grade, for example, explain the purpose and meaning of the Pledge of Allegiance and the significance of the phrase "under God." And by that, I don't think he means the fact that it was added to the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954, not when it was written originally. Identify.
That's in the fine print, right? You got to read the fine print to get that kind of stuff.
Right. Identify and explain the meaning of the United States official motto, "In God We Trust," including the importance of religion to the American people. I guess we're not Americans. Well, I mean, Stephen, but Scott, I guess we're not Americans because religion's not important to us. Second grade, identify stories from Christianity that influenced the American colonists and the founders and culture, including the teachings of Jesus and Nazareth, e.g., the Golden Rule and the Sermon on the Mount. And for eighth graders, evaluate the role of Judeo-Christian ideals in supporting colonial demands for independence as exemplified, this is specific in the curriculum, as exemplified by the Bible being a frequently cited authority by America's founders. I feel like if that were naturally the conclusion, like when you say evaluate the role of Judeo-Christian ideals, in this thing, I feel like if you have to say as exemplified by this specific thing, like it's because that's not a natural answer to like what you're asking for. And you're what he's saying is teach specifically this because specifically this. And like he says, we don't want to preach in the classrooms. We shouldn't be indoctrinating the students, wink, wink. But what he says is to focus on the historical, literary, and secular value of the King James Version of the Bible. And I think that there is no historical or literary value in that Bible that you can't get from anywhere else.
Right.
And there's no other secular value to speak of that I'm aware of. And
that's pretty thick. It'd make maybe a good paperweight or something. I mean, I suppose that would be a secular value, right?
Yeah. A paperweight, really, not even, go ahead.
Like secularly speaking, I'm thrilled when these lawmakers, tip their hand and say, well, it's got to be the new King James Version, because like the more that children can be forced to endure the King James Version of all versions, the more they can distance themselves and say, this is bullshit. I don't really care about this. Will that change them from like identifying, oh yeah, I'm Christian on the surface? No, but at least that won't have any, the more that they get forced into this kind of exposure, hopefully the less roots they actually are able to put down, especially using a version like the King James.
I wonder if it would just kind of reinforce what they're learning in church. You know what I mean?
Like, isn't that the whole point? I mean, isn't that
exactly
the objective here?
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, because I remember when I was a kid thinking how different the things were that I was learning on Sunday and then learning Monday through Friday. And so the idea here is put the same thing from Sunday in every other day so that they get this consistent influx of this information, and it will seem more true. It will feel more naturally true, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Or at least less conflict to deal with. It makes it easy to swallow, basically.
Yeah.
Sticking with that M&M metaphor there, right?
Yeah.
So it coats it with a spoonful of sugar. Exactly. I want to jump back to Stephen real quick here. So I think we all know what the real motivation is here, right? This is unashamed, unadulterated indoctrination of Oklahoma's children. And I mean, can you expand on that a little bit more? I mean, you were just kind of touching on it a little bit there. I mean, what do you think about that they're doing this to the Oklahoma's children?
Yeah, like it was so good for me. Like it was like for me to just like dig into this article and the why is this happening? And it just became like a real crystallizing moment that white supremacy doesn't need burning crosses anymore. That this is all about feeding a Christian nationalist base, sucking off President Pumpkin, dumbing down the public, and paving the way to privatized education. And all of those things are things that support folks that have privilege. while erasing those without. There's nothing about this that is trying to increase diversity. It's all about crystallizing power around the people who have power. It's about building those buttresses, about building those barriers. And this is a way of radicalizing children. It's so great to be able to look at cultures that we're not familiar with here, right, in North America, to look to places in Asia, to look to places in the Middle East, and to not understand how they can be so different, so barbaric in air quotes, and just like even just the idea of Israelis mentally checking out and saying, well, no, they're not really human. They're just Palestinians. They're a different kind of human. And for us to be like, whoa, that is so radical. How could you possibly think that? And to see that, okay, this is how you get to that place, by feeding children this kind of bullshit, and just using your power, using your privilege to force it upon them. And to like, this is just a buttressing of that system, systematic marginalization of people who aren't in power.
That's I'm getting a weird sense of deja vu as I listen to you there, Stephen. It seems like seems like it'd be some kind of recurring theme. Eli, so how do you think this fits into like a bigger strategy for Christian nationalism in the United States?
Well, we just talked about this. I think it was last week on the Nonprofits. Texas just passed the same thing, the 10 Commandments in public schools. We covered this on Oklahoma when they first put, Ryan Walters. We talk about Ryan Walters a lot. I feel like maybe he and I should kiss. I don't know, but the point being,
next week on the Nonprofits.
Yeah, we talk about him so much. I just feel like, I don't know. Let's just get it over with, Rybear. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. Texas just did the same thing last week. He wants the KJV in classes 5 through 12, grades 5 through 12. Ryan Walters does in Oklahoma. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, it's for, the secular value. And color me skeptical, but I don't know of any secular value, like I mentioned a minute ago, that you can get out of the Bible. And the only value I see that is novel to the Christian Bible is theological in nature. Right. So like the moral codes, you get them from, you get them from Sumerians, from the Code of Hammurabi, from the Sumerians was like Ur-Nammu, I think. But like, all those more ancient codes than the Hebrew law that these, Judeo-Christian values are coming from, you can get them elsewhere without the theology. So why is it specifically the Bible? Why is it specifically the Christian Bible? And why is it specifically the KJV? It's just, it's the same. They want the same blanket Christianity across the nation. And it has been said many times before. I can't remember the words of, I think it was Hamilton who had said it originally, but like whoever, any church, any government that can rule, on one, sect of Christianity can rule out any other sect of Christianity. Right. So
yeah,
it doesn't.
Yeah, that's something that I think that many religious people kind of miss out on. They push in favor of theocratic. I mean, and this really does reek of theocracy here, right? We're incorporating the theology into the school curriculum, but any kind of theocracy, you run the risk of losing that religious freedom. Religious freedom is not just freedom from religion, but also freedom on what kind of religion you want to be a part of. And so this kind of thing is just as bad for other Christians as it is for Muslims, as it is for Hindus, as it is for the non-religious like us or whomever, or people who are staunchly Christian and just want to have a secular government. And, it's really very troubling. So thanks for that, Eli. I have a question that I want to address to both of you. textbooks are an issue because we're not, when you change standards, when you make drastic changes to standards like that, it's not just like, oh, the schools just need to change what they say next Wednesday, change this one paragraph. I mean, no, they have to get all new materials. They need to have textbooks designed around those standards, and they have to have teacher training and all this kind of stuff. So it really is a significant effort on the part of the school districts to implement these changes. It's not just a wave of a pen or sneaking something under the wire like happened here. So I have a two-part question here, and I'll give you both a chance to take a stab at it here. First is, so given the political climate in the U.S. today, do you think these changes in the standards can survive? I mean, obviously they're against the U.S. Constitution, but these days, that doesn't guarantee that something's going to get struck down. Do you think they're likely to be revoked and or rewritten? Are they going to stay for a little while? Or is this the bellwether for bigger changes that are on the horizon? That's part one. Part two is assuming that publishers will for these really highly specialized changes in the standards in time for the upcoming school year, right? We got just like another 2 months until the school year starts. Do you think that independent publishers like, I don't know, PragerU or the Heritage Foundation or anything like that, do you think they're going to step up and fill in the gap there? Do you think that might be part of the intention? Could we even see chick tracks in Oklahoma classrooms? And so I want to start with Stephen there. First, do you think these changes are likely to stay, or are they a sign of what's more to come? And do you think that the late introduction of these for this coming school year, do you think that was maybe part of the plan so that they could use some of this privately produced materials?
Well, I don't know. That would sound kind of profitable for these Christian publishing places to be able to churn out and get these books off their shelves into government-run schools. I don't know. I don't think Christian publishing houses are that unethical, are they? Thankfully, it would be an issue, like not only for generating textbooks out of nowhere. Clearly they would have to be reaching out to Zondervan or some other publishing place to help fill those gaps, but also like I'm not a classroom teacher, but just the idea that suddenly I need to be reworking all of my materials to emphasize these new standards, and that doesn't sound like a quick and easy overhaul either.
That is no small task there. That is right? That is a major deal there. That's a major deal,
right?
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, if you care.
And especially for teachers who are not Christians, who aren't a member of the faith or are part of a different faith. Like, I don't know if Hindus are allowed to live in Oklahoma. I don't know if they're allowed to teach in Oklahoma, but what do they know about, are they as well versed in the Sermon on the Mount as everybody else?
Right.
Should they have to be? No, they shouldn't have to be. Will it stand? I hope that it doesn't, but I also hope that we're living in a simulated reality. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't we all? Eli, I want to abandon the questions that I was just asking because what Stephen was saying just kind of gave me a new question here. So I want to focus on one last thing before we wrap things up here. And that is the idea that, so the teachers, there might be non-Christian teachers in Oklahoma that have to learn this material. Do you think they're trying to proselytize the teachers as well with this?
That is super interesting because I didn't take it exactly that direction. But when Stephen said that, I thought the same thing. Like, yeah, there's got to be teachers that like don't really know the stories in the Bible. Now they have to spend the next 2 to 4 to 5 weeks, not only preparing all their other lesson plans, but also reading the Bible and familiarizing themselves with what it says so that they can teach it in the ways that they're expected to. I mean, it certainly would serve a theocratic,
or maybe it's going to drive out some of the non-Christian teachers. Maybe they're hoping the non-Christian teachers will just throw their hands up and, go to, Colorado or something.
Yeah. I don't know. Somewhere better.
Force Valkai out of there.
Yeah. We should get him on the show to have him talk about it.
Yeah. I think he's way on his way out of Oklahoma. I don't know. Who knows? But It definitely would be serving to a theocracy to,
Right.
to have only teachers that know and believe what the Bible says and believe that it is, fundamental and inherent to the origin of the United States. So yeah, it might not just be the kids that they're targeting.
Right. I suppose if all the teachers were Christian, then they would get much less pushback from the teacher organizations and so forth.
Right. Yeah, it would kind
All
of
right.
be this way already to a smaller degree.
Well, that's however that's going to work out. I'm imagining it's not going to be entirely pleasant. But if you are interested in more pleasantries, you can follow the nonprofits by clicking on these links.